Will the Senate please come to order? Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Senator Baker, Senator Chun Oakland, Senator Dela Cruz, Senator English, Senator Espero, Senator Fukunaga, Senator Gabbard, Senator Galutaria,
Excused.
Senator Green, Senator He, Senator Ige, Senator Ihara, Senator Kahele, Senator Kidani,
Excused. Oh, she's here.
Senator Kim,
Excused.
Senator Kochi, Senator Nishihara, Senator Ryan, Senator Shimabukuro, Senator Slom, Senator Solomon, Senator Taniguchi, Senator Tokuda, Senator Wakai. Mr. President,
Here.
23 present, 2 excused.
The chair has read the journal of the preceding day and approves the same. Are there any introductions this morning? Senator Solomon.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. It gives me great pleasure to introduce our governor who's with us. If our governor will please stand to be recognized. As you know, Mr. President, our governor has done a tremendous job in all of our efforts for our new day in Hawaii, and especially with his appointments to boards and commissions. There's never been a dull moment, thanks to our governor. And rest assured, we're going to continue to the end. Thank you, Governor.
Thank you.
Turning to the order of the day on page 58, advise and consent.
If there are no objection from the members, we'll be taking advise and consent on consent.
Standing Committee Report numbers 3472 to 3476 on page 62 for adoption.
Discussion. Senator Ihara.
Mr. President, I rise in opposition to Governor's Message 755.
Please proceed.
Mr. President, the singular criteria in deciding my vote in on this nomination for the Commission on Water Resource Management is whether the nominee meets the statutory requirement of having substantive experience in water resource management. The eligibility requirement for this commission is clear. It does not allow for on-the-job training or learning, as important as that may be, and does not waive this requirement if the nominee can be a fast learner and fair in approaching decisions of the commission. The substantive experience requirement for members of this commission is a rare and important one among state boards and commissions. The requirement is that the nominee already have substantive experience in water resource management, not land management, not drinking water or water resource planning, as important as that may be, or having worked with landowners with interest in water resource allocation. Due to no fault of his own, I believe the nominee dutifully submitted his application and accepted the nomination committee's recommendation by placing him on the list given to the governor for consideration. I believe the nominating committee erred in submitting the nominee's name without an interview. It had only the nominee's resume, which on its face lacked the required substantive experience in water resource management. To be fair, the previous governor nor previous nominating committees appear to have taken into account the unique statutory requirement of substantive experience in water resource management. Mr. President, I believe all parties in the Water Commission appointment process should start adhering to the Commission's eligibility requirement. And since the Senate is the last checkpoint in this process, it is our responsibility to uphold the law with this nomination. I have an additional concern, Mr. President, which is that 4 out of the 5 appointed members of the Water Commission are from Maui. I believe it is not appropriate for a small, although important neighbor island population to have a majority in making decisions in the future that will affect other islands. I have reviewed the nominee's qualifications and met with him this morning and find the nominee's past experience, as varied as it is, does not meet the eligibility requirement of substantive experience in water resource management. For this reason, I regretfully cannot in good conscience vote to confirm the nominee. Thank you, Mr. President.
Further discussion? If not, Senator He.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I too rise to vote no for Governor's Message 755.
Please proceed.
Thank you. I also rise to speak against Governor's Message 754. Let me try to, I will, because they're taken under one motion, try to deal with them separately. But would like to offer a few comments about the process as it has unfolded this year together. I do not believe that it is appropriate for the nominees to have their name submitted to the governor without, at minimum, an interview, even if it means by conference call, even if it means by Skype, or any other technological methodology for lack of time, funds, or effort. With respect to 755, Mr. Yamamura, I consider him a friend. I have known him perhaps as long as I've been in public office, because the first office I held was in 1982 election from the island of Molokai, which included the island of Lanai and West Maui. Ted Yamamura, at least to my recollection, was a resident of Maui when I first met him. I think he's a terrific guy. But that's not our job. Our job is just the opposite. Our job is to send people to commissions and positions that serve the public interest to the highest capacity, not to send our friends, regardless of the length of service or time we have known them. So I want to make that very clear. I met with Mr. Yamamura today. And typically of Mr. Yamamura, he emailed me last week because it's no secret that his confirmation has been at some question. And he emailed me. Perhaps one of you may have asked him to email me. I'm not sure. And he said, do we need to meet? I said, yes, we need to meet. And that I also said that I was concerned about the process. Let me be clear. The process is the kuleana of the governor. Whether the committee met or didn't meet with the nominee is really the kuleana of the governor. Whether they sent 5 names as they should have, or they sent 1 name, that's the kuleana of the governor. Because the governor is the one that chooses the nominee. Our job is to ensure, for the public interest, that the nominee is qualified. The fact that there may have been others who segments of the community may feel are more qualified is not the issue. The issue is the governor sent us Mr. Yamamura. After meeting with Mr. Yamamura, I came away with a strong feeling that he's not qualified. It doesn't mean he won't try hard, but it means he's not qualified. And I'm saddened by that. But it confirms for me what I had been thinking. I wish he was being appointed to a different commission, but he's not, because that was the governor's choice. I watched the confirmation hearing. I watched and read the testimony. I read the committee report. The committee report is absent of his qualifications. And if the chair wants to defend his qualifications, I'm all for it. Because that will give us an opportunity to do what is expected by the public, to have a debate. I do not believe that Mr. Yamamura is qualified. With regard to Governor's Message 754, Jonathan Starr. I have known Jonathan at least 2 decades. His politics and my politics are in closer alignment than my politics and Mr. Yamamura. I think he's a terrific guy. But he is not qualified, in my judgment. And I will tell you why. The law requires that one member shall have substantial expertise on Hawaiian issues, particularly as they relate to water. I had a fairly long conversation with Jonathan Starr yesterday. And I asked him very clearly, what makes you the Hawaiian expert? I presume he was driving, because when we first called him, he was in Kahikinui. And the second time, when he returned the call, I think he was by Ulupalakua. And this is what he told me when I asked him. He said, when Hawaiian questions come about, I call Charlie Maxwell. This is what I said to him. That doesn't make you an expert. That makes you smart. Somewhere in the conversation, my friend Jonathan said, I spent substantial time in Alo'i. Respectfully, that doesn't make you a Hawaiian expert. That means you spent substantial time in Alo'i. I have owned a surfboard all my life. I am not a surfer. I intervened in Ho'opili and Koa Ridge because of my firm belief in the preservation of prime agricultural land. That doesn't make me a farmer. I had been hearing that the Office of Hawaiian Affairs supported Jonathan Starr as the Hawaiian expert. So I read the testimony. That's not what I read. What I read is the Office of Hawaiian offers the following comments. OHA urges the committee to ensure that all persons appointed to the Commission on Water Resource Management possess substantial experience in the area of water resource management, and to further ensure that at least one person appointed to the Commission on Water Resource Management possesses substantial experience or expertise in traditional Hawaiian water resource management techniques and in traditional Hawaiian riparian usage. Let me make something clear. I do not believe he's Hawaiian, but that is not the basis of my objection. Here's a book, Olelo Oiwi. It's written by Hokulani Cleland. He's not Hawaiian. He teaches at Kekula Kaiopuni o Ni'ihau to Ni'ihau students. I believe he is expert in Hawaiian language, and in particular, the Ni'ihau dialect. Here's a book called Hawaiian Mythology. Its author is Martha Beckwith. She is the first to begin to document the Kumulipo. She is not Hawaiian, but I believe she is an expert in Hawaiian mythology. Here's a book, Who Owns the Crown Lands of Hawaii? This is written by Professor John Van Dyke. He's not a Hawaiian. But I believe he is expert in the legal issues involving the Crown lands. And just so Hawaiians are not left out, here's a book, Native Hawaiian Rights, by Melody Kapili Aloha Mackenzie. She is Hawaiian. So I do not make these comments because Mr. Starr may or may not be Hawaiian, but to point out, we cannot find published works by Mr. Starr on Hawaiian water rights, riparian rights. We cannot find evidence that would suggest that he meets the standard required by our statute, in my opinion. And don't forget, many of you on this floor, 3 years ago, we went through the same issue on the Land Use Commission. As its chair, I recommended 2 people be denied. One got by the skin of his teeth. The other one, who the statute requires to be expert in Hawaiian issues governing land, was denied confirmation. He was a part Hawaiian. Because of his improper vote on Core Ridge, the Sierra Club, in its lawsuit before the Circuit Court, was successful in overturning the Land Use Commission's decision to grant a land use change from ag to urban. That's how important our job is today. It's not about friendship. It's about doing your job. And do not think for 1 second that there's an axe to grind at this microphone. There is none. I have tried to stay out of the debate. And the environmental community knows that, because I have returned 0 emails but to one person, Kapua Sproat. And I have told Kapua that the process of A and B was the same. If the process is not good for B, it's not good for A. I have told her, cherry picking 1/2, because 1 is going to be adversarial to a court proceeding and 2 is going to be compassionate, is improper. That is not our job. Our job is to vote for those qualified to assume the responsibility for which they are nominated. And if they are not qualified, the governor has a duty to send more names down. This should have been avoided. This debate should not be held today. The last day for advice and consent is May 1st. I thank the committee for doing its work. I thank you, Mr. President, for allowing me to have some dialogue with you. I thank my 2 friends upstairs, I presume they're up there, Ted Yamamura and Jonathan Starr. But respectfully, and with a deep sense of regret, neither of them are qualified. Thank you, Mr. President.
Further discussion? If not, Senator De La Cruz.
Thank you, Mr. President. You know, all joking aside, I guess not everyone feels Maui no Ka'oi. You know, I want to talk about several things that was mentioned. You know, the 4 members speaking in support of Governor's Message 754 and 755. You know, it was mentioned that there's a imbalance on the Water Commission, that 4 of the appointed members shall be from Maui. And that's true. But I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing. That's what the law allows. It's intentional that there is no geographic requirement for the Water Commission. And if we were to say that for being from Maui is going to somehow impact the state. Well, look at the state legislature. 18 senators are from Oahu. So how all of a sudden is it different with the Water Commission? In regards to Jonathan Starr, OHA had submitted his letter originally as part of 5 names. That letter was sent to the nominating committee. I wasn't here when when this whole Water Commission was actually established. Members of who are on the floor were part of the legislation. They wrote the legislation, and it's so interesting now how they would write this legislation and criticize the process that they were a part of. We inherited this. Some people here actually drafted it and made it into law. And now all of a sudden they don't like the process. The DLNR kept saying several times, and they're being, unfortunately, criticized for it when they said, well, we weren't involved in that. We weren't involved in those specific discussions. We weren't involved as part of the list. Well, that was intentional because the Water Commission was not supposed to have any influence from DLNR or the governor or the legislature. So as apolitical as it possibly could be, the nominating committee was 2 appointed from the governor, 1 from the Senate, and 1 from the House. And hands off. We weren't supposed to be involved in any of it because water is important. I believe in Jonathan Starr. I've met him several times. I went to Maui. There was overwhelming testimony in support of him. And I'm honored that both of these men will be on the Water Commission, provided that they get confirmed today. But let me speak a little bit about Ted Yamamura and his unfair criticisms. Senator, he mentioned, or my colleague from Kahalu mentioned that Kapua Sproat stepped forward during the hearing, and she did. And she criticized the process with Ted Yamamura. And as he mentioned, the same process selected Jonathan Starr. So that's I don't understand that rationale where the same process would somehow be okay with one person, but not okay with the other. I don't understand that kind of logic. Then my question to some of those who were against the nominee, I asked, if you had concerns with the process, why didn't you come forward before? Why only now? I really believe that Ted Yamamura has experience in public and private sector. He's a small businessman who made it in Hawaii and at the same time volunteers his time to government bodies. He is definitely committed to his community and is shown by his nonprofit and government boardships. He has experience in water matters via the Board of Land and Natural Resources and most importantly, the Maui Board of Water Supply. I mean, seriously, how can you not have water experience but you're on the Board of Water Supply? What else do they do but water? Despite all of that, he's being criticized for saying that he has an open mind, that he's willing to learn. Okay, I think that that's a good thing, saying that you are willing to learn. I wish more people would say that. That's far better than having someone who's just entrenched, who's not willing to change because things around us have changed. The object is the greater good for the greater community. Ted should not be penalized for being a small businessman, for saying he has an open mind. Further, he should not be penalized for our concerns with the nomination process. Oddly enough, as I mentioned, the same process resulted in Governor's Message 754. I'd also like to tell my colleagues that if they had concerns about what the nominating committee was doing, they could have called the Senate's representative. It was mentioned that the Senate is the last stop. Well, the Senate is also part of the first stop. The Senate appoints someone to the nominating committee. So just because you don't like it how it is at the end, that doesn't mean all of a sudden you escape because you weren't involved in the beginning. Both of these men are qualified, proven public servants, and have contributed to making Hawaii better. And I really do believe that their abilities and qualifications should not be questioned. Thank you.
Further discussion, Senator Fukunaga.
Thank you, Mr. President. Rising to speak in opposition to Governor's Message number 755.
Please proceed.
I hadn't really planned to speak this afternoon. However, I do want to respond to some of the emails and contacts that we have been receiving recently on whether or not the nominee is a fair and a balanced person. I do not doubt that this nominee is someone who has broad experience and can bring many areas of expertise to bear upon water use management. However, the Water Commission demands something more. It demands the implementation of Hawaii's public trust doctrine. What is the public trust? Article 11, Section 1 of Hawaii's Constitution mandates that all public natural resources are held in trust by the state for the benefit of the people. Article 11, Section 7 makes specific reference to water, including the directive to protect, control, and regulate the use of Hawaii's water resources for the benefit of the people. In the 2000 Waiholi case, the Hawaii Supreme Court ruled that these two provisions adopt the public trust doctrine as a fundamental principle of constitutional law in Hawaii. What does the public trust mandate? The public trust imposes a dual mandate of protection and maximum reasonable beneficial use. This establishes an affirmative trustee duty on the Commission to take the public trust into account in the planning and allocation of water resources and to protect public trust uses wherever possible. And what are some of those public trust uses? The public trust protects certain public trust uses that include resource protection, Native Hawaiian uses, Department of Hawaiian Homelands, appurtenant water rights, and domestic water uses. These purposes have priority over private commercial uses. When we have looked at many of the emails that we have seen coming before us, it is clear to me that many believe that it is simply a matter of balancing and allocations being made between all users. However, I think the Constitution holds us to a much higher standard, and to require that members of the Water Commission meet the qualification of substantial water experience means that they have to have experience in implementing and upholding this doctrine. For those reasons, I am respectfully voting no. Thank you.
Further discussion, Senator Solomon.
Thank you, Mr. President. I speak in support of both Governor's Message number 754 and Governor's Message number 755.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. In rebut to the remarks that were made by the Judiciary Chairman, Mr. President, I feel compelled to respond. When making our decision, this is the book that we used. The Hawaii Revised Statutes that defined a process as to how we were conducting this nomination. As explained by the Chairman, Mr. President, of Waterland Committee, he already explained our position, simple, but to the point. The statute does not define geographics in terms of where these commissioners have to be appointed from. Number two, questions came up as to whether or not they were interviewed. The statute didn't dictate the process. DLNR testified that they felt it was inappropriate. We had a meeting prior to the hearing. We had DLNR come forward and explain the process to us. They admitted at that moment that perhaps it should be revisited. And maybe when the nominees come forward, or those being considered, that they perhaps should educate these persons more. For whatever the reason, you know, we sound like Sunday, what do they call that? Sunday quarterbacks, all trying to, you know, make a call here. You know, we're dealing with the information at hand. Now, I find it very difficult, Mr. President, to accept the previous speaker's definition of what an expert is. My family has been practicing the art of hula for 150 years. My grandmother, who is a lawyer, has never written a piece, has never written a book. But she's an expert. My mother, who is also a kumuhula, a lawyer, has never written a book. If that's a requirement, Mr. President, according to the speakers, in terms of expressing one's knowledge of the Hawaiian culture, then many of our kupuna would not even be part of that category. I find that offensive. As far as Mr. Yamamura, Mr. President, for me, as a senator who has gone through numerous advise and consent, you know what I hold as a high criteria making my decisions? Is this person truly a keikioka aina? What is his track record? Mr. Yamamura is a Vietnam veteran. I don't have to remind you and those of us that are on the floor. In those days, you didn't go to the war, you were imprisoned. He served his country well. He's in numerous community organizations within his own community. He understands the aina. Now, I have a great problem with this big disconnect between the Vaiola and the aina. Those two come together. Of how are you going to make decisions? Because their decision is to determine who gets the water. Now, my mana'o is this. What I was appalled at during the hearing process of how there is this big disconnect. When we did the water code, and I was part of that process. So was my colleague sitting here. She was part of that process that spoke earlier. My other colleague was part of that process. And the disconnect that I felt, that I was very much concerned about, was when the Hawaiians were coming forward and saying, you know, that now we're competing. No, the water code is clear. The Kanaka Maoli are supposed to get their water. And what is left is to be fought over, because that was the situation that we were in then, when they were building all of the resort properties, not only on Maui, but also on Hawaii. And when they were diverting the water out of the valleys, destroying the lifeway of the Hawaiian Kanaka Maoli. This is how this water code came into being. And this is what this water code is all about. And they have to work with all of the county water departments. They're not supposed to be acting in isolation, which seems that's what's going on now. And Mr. Yamamura brings that expertise to the table. He's worked with the Board of Water Supply on Maui. He understands those kinds of needs. And in particular, Maui is the county that has all of this pilikia because of how everything was created way back when in the days of the plantation. Now, Hawaii Island, we don't have that pilikia because we dedicated all of our ditch system to the Department of Agriculture. So these were the issues that were discussed in great detail during the hearings. As far as Mr. Starr is concerned, he has a lot of na'o, affinity, because he lives it. He's living in that community. He's farming in that community. He understands what that means. These are the kinds of characteristics that I am looking for as a senator when I make my recommendations. Okay, you know, I had Earth Justice came. Earth Justice is a national organization that came and gave their na'o, their mana'o. You know? And when it came to a point in the discussion, I was politely told, well, I'm an expert because I'm an attorney. Well, I had to tell them, well, I guess I just have a PhD, so I guess you're too smart for me. You know, what have we come to? The Sierra Club is a big national organization now, funded by all of these contributions. We protect our environment with this. And I'm proud to say I was part of all of this beginning, where we have some of the best environmental laws in the country to protect our resources. But what's key is that we get people on those boards of commission that love Hawaii, that live in those communities every day, that breathe the air, know the people who are benefiting. Not people coming in from the outside and telling me or telling us, you're not qualified. You know, how many of us have worked in a lo'i? I did. My grandfather had over 200 acres. Let me tell you, it's a tough life. It's not easy. You know, I'm the oldest, I'm one of the old protesters over here. I'm very proud of it. But when I hear this kind of rationale as to why people are not qualified, and in due respect, you know, trustees have a higher fiduciary duty, Mr. President. It's in the law. These are commissioners. If we feel, this body feels that they should be trustees, well, let's make them trustees. It's up to us. It's all up to us how we want to conduct our business for this great state. And because at this moment it's up to me how I'm voting, I'm supporting these two individuals because I feel they bring a perspective to that commission that is real, that affects people in their everyday lives. And I feel confident that they're going to be able to do the pono thing of what is right. Thank you.
Further discussion, Senator Baker.
Thank you, Mr. President. I too rise in strong support of Governor's Message 754 and 755.
Please proceed.
I wasn't going to stand up, but since the question and honor of some of the Maui residents and the reason that they've been appointed and have an opportunity to serve has been called into question, I felt it was important for somebody from Maui to stand up. I would definitely like to associate myself with the remarks of both the chair and the vice chair of the Waterland Committee. And I would like to assure my colleagues who, after listening to some of the debate, may have some questions on the qualities, qualifications, and integrity of these two nominees. It is quite fitting that there be more than just one or two representatives on the Water Commission, because right now, the bulk of the issues and where the hotbed of concern is on Maui. And there have been times when there has been no representation from that county. But they're not in the majority, but they'll have an opportunity to make sure that all of the concerns from all sides can be heard and hopefully addressed. I mean, I like to see win-win opportunities whenever possible. Sometimes with some of these sticky matters, it's not. But to the extent that you can have people who understand the community, have lived there, whether a transplant or a keikioka aina, who feel the community, who have a deep reach and an abiding love of both the county of Maui and the state of Hawaii, as well as all of its people, who by their very background and life experience exhibit the kind of integrity, thoughtfulness, ability to work with others, and an abiding desire to uphold the public trust in all of its elements, then I think those folks are eminently qualified and have the personal integrity and the personal qualifications to do the right thing on this commission and that's why I'm standing in strong support of these two nominees.
Further discussion, Senator English.
Mr. President, I rise in support of Governor's Message 754 and 755.
Please proceed.
You know, members, after listening to the comments and the debate here, first, let me say this. I'd like to have the words of the senator from the Big Island inserted into the record as if they were my own.
So ordered.
I share those sentiments, and I want to thank the senator for bringing it back home. You know, we got stuck in this idea that you have to look at paper qualifications. We have to look at all of these things, and yes, it matters, but the word that the senator used that got my attention was the na'au. You know, I know both of these nominees very well, and I can truly say that we cannot question their integrity. In fact, that's not part of this debate. It should not be. Both of them are upstanding and outstanding individuals in our community. Some of the things that I've heard, though, that I want to comment on is, you know, this idea that, well, we have too many members from Maui. Let's reverse that, members of the Senate. I represent 3.5 islands, Molokai, Lanai, Kaho'olawe, and a good part of Maui. How do you think I feel when I see a commission comes up that's making decisions for Molokai and for Lanai and for Kaho'olawe, and nobody from those islands are on those commissions? How do you think I feel when we have a land board that's making all these decisions for, let's round it up, guys, for 4 islands? So, if we want to debate this point, I will agree with you guys that we shouldn't have 4 people on any one commission from Maui. But let's say that we shouldn't have a majority of anybody, any commission from Oahu. Let's spread it out. Big Island would like more representation. My 4 islands would like more representation. Kauai would like more representation. In fact, so would Niihau. But that's not the case, and I never hear anybody saying, gee, we have a majority of the members of that commission from Oahu. So, you know, this straw man argument doesn't make sense to me. And that's exactly what it is, a straw man argument. So I think, after all of this discussion and all of this heated emails and communications, which I appreciate, actually. I appreciate the ones that are original. The ones that kind of get me are the ones that they click the button that is all the same words. And by the way, we can't respond to them because they mask their emails. So how can we respond directly to a person when we get their name, but man, their email goes to some organization? So, you know, the emails that we pay attention to, just so that everybody understands this, you click a button, it's like, okay, fine. But if you actually send an original email, we read that. We look at that. Just, you know, it has more weight. Anyway, Mr. President, I think that Maui and the state of Hawaii will be well served by these 2 nominees. The Maui delegation, yourself, Senator Baker, and myself stand firmly behind them because we know that balance is provided for in the deliberations of the commission. And frankly, you know, just on the Hawaiian issues point, if you understand the Pash ruling and if you read that and you understand what was said in that, basically it says everybody dealing with land and water issues in Hawaii should understand Native Hawaiian rights. So I get a little bit hoo-hoo when I hear this term that, oh no, that nominee is supposed to be the Hawaiian expert, which then leaves the question, well, the others should not. Why don't we make all of them sit down and have a little history lesson on Hawaiian water rights? We have a very unique water system, water laws in the world. And I feel confident that both Mr. Yamamura and Mr. Starr understand this. But some of the others, I'm not sure. In fact, our Land Use Commission should understand this. In fact, all the boards and commissions dealing with land and water should understand this. So if we're going to have a debate about Hawaiian expertise, published or unpublished, because most of our expertise is unpublished, right? Then let's require it across the board. And that can be easily done in a bill next year that says if you're going on these boards, you have to, like we had one of our senators require all of us to sit in a class that we all have to sign that we went to the class. Wonderful idea. Let's make that requirement for all the boards. And we can do that in a bill next year. Thank you, Senator Solomon, because you said it starts with us and it ends with us. Absolutely correct. Now, Mr. President, just on a side note, because we're taking all of this in one motion on the nominees to the Board of Regents. Mr. President, normally I vote no on those people that didn't come to see me across the board. And frankly, I haven't met with a good number of the regents. I'm going to make an exception to that rule this time because I trust very strongly in the judgment of the chair of education. But normally it's a no because this is the reasoning. If they didn't come to see me, and I am 1 out of 25 votes, to ask for the vote, what happens when they have a student out there on the regents that says, I have this problem? They're going to ignore them. What happens when the university system on Molokai has an issue? If they didn't come and talk to me, I don't know if they came and saw all of you, but if they didn't come and see, usually I vote no. Because, hey, it starts and it ends here. So I'm making this one exception this time because I trust the judgment and the work of the senator who chairs the Committee on Education. But a really stern warning to all the others down the future that, you ignore each of us at your own peril. You don't make an appointment, it's an automatic no for me. Thank you, Mr. President.
Further discussion, Senator Kouchi.
Rise on a point of rebuttal, Mr. President.
In support?
Support and rebut.
Please proceed.
As a senator representing a neighbor island district, I would be remiss if I didn't stand and also express my outrage, I guess, at the comments about it being inappropriate for 4 of the members to be from Maui. When I listened to the majority policy leader read aloud what the law requires, and residency was not an item. It further just infuriates me that by virtue of continuing to vote favorably for commissioners who come from Oahu to dominate boards of Oahu residents, that is, in fact, the only permissible majority in that speaker's mind, because that's something that he supports and will not support Maui, and I assume now Kauai or the Big Island, and it's greatly disappointing to actually hear this. We have lived under the system where the majority of boards and commissioners come from Oahu. When we sit in advise and consent meetings, I personally do my best to look at the qualifications of the individuals that are placed before me, and don't ask them where they live. I have commended the governor's representatives that I have met with for what I believe have been tremendous nominees that the governor has sent down, and have to date supported each and every one of them based on their merits and their qualifications, and not on where they live. I will tell the governor, however, while he is in here, it is my hope during his tenure that we have a qualified person from Kauai who will come to his desk and will get to this floor as well, because it would be a great day for me to stand up and support a nominee from Kauai. But until that day happens, I will continue to do my job to look at the individuals and make my decisions based upon their qualifications. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion, Senator Ryan.
I rise in support of both Governor Message number 754 and 755.
Please proceed.
I was a voting member on this committee when both parties came before us. But prior to that, I had a lot of visits from people who were opposing Mr. Yamamura. I don't know Mr. Yamamura. I take the word of my colleague, Senator He, that he is a good man. But that wasn't the issue. What came concerning to me is the process of how the nominees were recommended. So I asked the chair of Waterland, Senator De La Cruz, to have a briefing so that I, as the freshman senator, could understand how this happened. Well, guess what, colleagues? Those of you who helped to craft this, it's really bad. It's the most non-transparent process I have seen yet. That's not the fault of the nominees. They followed the law. The people on the selection committee followed the law as you crafted it. And that's what I discovered sitting there. We moved on to the hearing. I had people, young Hawaiian professionals, come before me and start to talk about Mr. Starr. I said, don't go there. I know where you're going. You're going to say he's not Hawaiian. Sorry, this senator is not going to use that excuse. Nobody opposed Jonathan for that position. But when that came up, I was deeply offended. I asked blind questions in the hearing that Earth Justice sent to me. I was okay with doing that because I'm a fair person. I was satisfied with their answers. Of course, Jonathan was more extensive in his answers because he has more in-depth experience. But I did not feel Mr. Yamamura did not have enough. I was satisfied with his answers as well. To me, it's important not to just have conservationists or scientists on this body, but you should have somebody representing the user. It's important in the dialogue when they deliberate on decisions. I think it's very important. Earlier this morning, I talked to Mr. Murakami, who I respect, and I told him, if a person is chosen because of their conservation background or their science background, then I expect them to be the best conservationist or scientist on that commission. How can one man sway everybody's vote? That's what I couldn't understand. Really? He has that much power? Well, I saw it as balance and fairness. Mr. Ripun came before us, who was part of crafting the original selection process, and he said enough is enough. But then he also mentioned the problem came up before, in his opinion. So why wasn't it changed then? What happened? Why are we revisiting this, which he says was a bad deal? Senator, he is right. You cannot cherry pick. They both were under the same scrutiny and criteria. You cannot say one is okay and the other isn't. Also, so what if 4 of them are from Maui? Could it be that I grew up on a neighbor island and I know what it's like when you feel your representation is not balanced? That, to me, has no credibility. So what if 4 is from Maui? This is a state commission, good for Maui. With that said, Mr. President, I urge my colleagues to support both nominees. Thank you.
Further discussion? If not, Senator He.
Thank you, Mr. President. We'd like to offer a few remarks in response to some of the concerns raised by previous speakers in opposition.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. The chairman of the committee rhetorically asked or stated that we could have called the Senate's representative. I did. I called him. His name is Warren Watanabe. And I was satisfied by his remarks that not having interviews was inappropriate given the task and responsibilities. I would be remiss if any member present or anyone who has come to observe the proceeding, if I left people with the impression that if you didn't publish a book, that didn't make you an expert in Hawaiian. So let me clarify. I use these books as evidence of expertise. I couldn't agree more with one of the previous speakers who asked rhetorically, what about the kupuna? That is absolutely correct. They are expert. So to any degree that I may have left the impression that you need to publish a book to be expert, that is the wrong impression. We are governed by the statutes. And nothing I heard, nothing, suggests to me that 754 or 755 meet the minimum requirements that the statute demands. I did not make the remark about the number of people from Maui. I frankly couldn't care less. That's not my kuleana. That's the governor's kuleana. And the fact that people may be overrepresented in Oahu is something that I also couldn't care less. Because the fact is, they couldn't sit on the commissions but for the confirmation vote held on the Senate floor. So everyone's responsible. I said earlier, and I'll conclude with that remark, that these are fine gentlemen. Whether they have the na'au or not is not for me to say. But the na'au is not in the statute. It's pretty clear. And just for the record, I was not one of the drafters or members present when these statutes were drafted. So what we've had to do is look at the committee reports to understand what the legislature intended. And what they intended is explicit in the statute. And neither of these gentlemen meet the statute. Thank you.
Further discussion? If not, Senator Ihara.
Mr. President, I'd like to follow up on my comments in opposition to Governor's Message 755.
Please proceed.
I wanted to point out that the Maui Board of Water Supply is an advisory body. It is not like the Honolulu Board of Water Supply. I understand they do adopt water plans from Maui for projected future use of water. So I would consider that having being an experience in water use planning. But I fail to understand how that can qualify for water resource management. Mr. President, I also would like to request separate votes for GM 754, 755, and 756.
So ordered. Any further discussion? If not, members, why don't we take Standcom reports 3472, that's Governor's Message number 811, beginning on page 58, through Governor's Message Standcom report 3475, that's Governor's Message 687 on page 61. We will conclude with discussion, and we will take those all in one motion if that's okay, and then we'll proceed on to Governor's Message 754 and 755. So for those, again, Standcom reports 3472 to 3475. Any further discussion? If not, do we have unanimous consent?
Twenty-five ayes.
Said Governor's messages have been confirmed.
On Standing Committee Report number 3476, Governor's Message number 754.
Members, further discussion on Governor's Message 754? If not, do we have unanimous consent? No votes for Senators Ihara, He, Green, all others voting aye.
22 ayes, 3
Reservations so ordered for Senator Kim.
22 ayes, 3 noes.
Governor's Message number 754 has been confirmed.
Standing Committee Report number 3476, Governor's Message 755.
Further discussion, members? If not, do we have unanimous consent? No votes for Senators Fukunaga, Chun Oakland, Ihara, He, Shimabukuro, and Ige. All others voting aye. Reservations so noted for Senator Kim.
19 ayes, 6 noes.
Governor's Message number 755 has been confirmed. Senator Gabbard, reservations so ordered.